Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you guys are having a good day. We are back here in the end today, but we're not going to be spending too much time here because, as I mentioned at the end of yesterday's episode, I want to work on acquiring some resources for the many spaceships that we're going to be trying and building around the outside of here for the kind of spaceport design I have in mind for transport out to the outer end islands and into the vastness of the void. And for that, I've decided we're going to need a lot of concrete because I want this place to be a really brightly coloured area. I want all the spaceships to be kind of extravagant and psychedelic and kind of like the sort of stuff that you would see in, Jack Kirby comics and Guardians of the Galaxy and that kind of thing. So what I'm thinking is we need to acquire a way of getting a large amount of concrete. And the materials for concrete are all fine. You can get sand, you can get gravel. I've got a decent amount of those in large quantities back at the ranch, or at the very least I can probably acquire some if I need any more. The problem then is converting them all into this stuff, because concrete, of course, has to go through the stage of being concrete powder first, and converting it from the powder into the regular concrete requires the application of a live water source, or at least flowing water, in order to transform it, basically. You can't do that in a crafting interface. You can't combine concrete powder with a bucket of water. It has to all be done manually, which is kind of a pain. As far as producing concrete goes, it's about as grindy as tree farming, effectively, because you have to place something in the world and then break it again in order for you to get the actual hardened concrete variety. So how are we going to do this? There are a few different ways, and lately, especially with the advent of TNT being a much more useful thing in terms of resource harvesting, we can actually incorporate TNT into one of the farm designs I'm going to show you today. We're going to go through 3 individual concrete farm designs that are going to be useful to Java Minecraft players. Unfortunately, this relies heavily on the ability to use blocks in your offhand and be able to place something and then break something. Or the first 2 do, at least. The third one might actually be something that could work in Bedrock, but once again, I don't think Bedrock has the 100% drop rate for TNT as of right now. So chances are you might lose a few blocks in the process, but it's also a decent alternative to having a farm where you have to place everything in water and then break it manually. Like, being able to use the offhand is a huge advantage in Java Edition, and that's kind of the mechanic that a lot of concrete producers tend to use. But enough about that, we're going to head through the portal back to the overworld, and we're going to get started on our farms. And since I'm pretty certain this is going to be a set of farms that I will use quite regularly, I'm actually going to incorporate them into the town of Founder's Forge. And what better place to do that than a giant lake full of water over here. Now, the first farm we're going to use is actually a design I have used before, and it's very, very simple to do. All we really need to do is set up a little inlet here, kind of a 3x3 inlet for the water over here, and then I'm going to try and fill this back in like so that the water from here flows down this way. When we take these blocks away again, we should find it all flowing into this space, and that's ideally what you want. You want a 3x3 space of flowing water like so. We can take the blocks that we've just dug out from here and we can create a 2-block high wall around the outside, and that's going to allow for no concrete to escape as we place and break it, because this basically just relies on you holding down the left and right click buttons with some concrete in your offhand and a pickaxe in your main hand. I'm going to hold the right click button first to get us started. We're going to place 1 block like that, and even though I've still got right click held down, because I'm standing in the space in front of this block, it's not going to place any more concrete powder. So then we can just hold down left and right click, and not only does this convert all of the concrete powder into concrete, the flow of the water is pushing it all back towards where I'm standing. So eventually, when I make my way through all of this concrete powder, I'm going to end up with a full stack of concrete in my inventory and no more concrete powder left over. And thankfully, even though some of the concrete is actually getting stuck on top of the block there, once we run through that full stack, it's all going to end up in my inventory, aside from 1 block. Now, where has that 1 block got to? Ah, there we go. That one's actually floated out a little bit further. So that is the problem with these really basic concrete converters, is that sometimes the concrete will kind of pop out in all sorts of different directions. I guess if we wanted to, we could probably increase the area of flowing water just by one more block and make sure that all of this inlet is flowing towards the player. And that way the amount of different directions the concrete can pop out in is mitigated by the fact that we have all of this water flowing down towards the player. And of course the advantages of a design like this are numerous in that it's a very simple thing to set up. It only requires a couple of water sources. You don't need a massive lake like this by any means. You just need a couple of buckets of water and you are good to go. Of course, the disadvantages start to crop up when you consider how much concrete you want to convert. If you're converting massive amounts of it, then this can get a little bit tiresome, primarily because you're having to go into your inventory constantly and refill the stack of concrete powder in your offhand. And a full inventory's worth means you're doing this multiple times, kind of disrupts the rhythm that you have, and you can't just set your mouse to like automatically click and then go and make a cup of tea and come back. You have to be very present, constantly refilling that section of your offhand. But what if there was a way that we could do that more automatically? What if there was a way we could have that stack of concrete powder in the offhand automatically refill itself as often as we wanted it to? Well, it just so happens that our next farm design does just that. With a few redstone components and a little bit of quick thinking, we can set up a farm that will automatically refill all of the concrete powder in your offhand and even store away some of the concrete that you've already converted. We're going to build this design right next to the other one, but we're going to clear out a little bit of a workspace here because this does require a small amount of space. We need to get a few hoppers and a dropper. We will also need, I think we'll need a power source of some kind. I might use a lever for this, actually. It's going to be relatively straightforward to build. We're going to place an output chest down here that's going to collect some, if not all, of the concrete, because we're going to be standing close enough to this farm that a lot of the concrete might end up in the player's inventory as well. And we're going to add a hopper going into that and another hopper on top of that, like so. We will have probably a hopper down here, I think, because we need somewhere for the water to flow into is the idea. And the water is going to be flowing from this spot over here into this location here. It's going to be flowing forwards from that point. And I think what I might actually do, this is going to be kind of overkill with the hoppers, I think, but just to make sure that all of the concrete ends up going into one of the hoppers at some point, because if you're converting a large amount of concrete over a long amount of time, longer than 5 minutes, some of the concrete might end up getting stuck in this spot here and despawning if you don't have hoppers pushing it through. So let's just check for a start using our white concrete that we've already converted. Check that that goes through into the storage chest. Yes, it does. Okay, so each of these hoppers basically feeds into this line of 3 hoppers at the bottom that's facing into the storage chest. It's a little bit overkill using 5 hoppers for this design, but you'll see what I mean. Now, when we place water at the back here, like so, that's flowing down into this open space. So it's not going to flow over the top of the hopper here. And that is perfect because what we're going to do is set up a little bit of redstone here to activate a dropper that's going to be placed on this side. The dropper's going to go there, and it's going to contain all of the concrete powder that we want to basically feed into the player's hand at all times. And of course, you can enlarge the inventory here by having a chest on top of here with a hopper feeding into it, as many chests as you want really. So effectively, you could stand here and harvest the concrete all day, and it's going to get converted by this water source and feed directly into this output chest or the player's inventory while you're standing here. I'm going to remove this block here and replace it with some obsidian because we're going to be looking at this block to place the concrete powder each time, and it's going to get converted instantly, but ideally you want a block here that you can look at that isn't going to break with an efficiency pickaxe, because you're going to be doing this with efficiency, and while the obsidian will still break, it's also going to take slightly longer, and you'll realize that you're not harvesting a new block of concrete each time, whereas if you had stone or something or dirt behind it, it would break quite quickly, and then potentially like the rest of the machine could break at that point. So what do we want to do? We want to put a redstone repeater on top of this hopper here, and we want some kind of stair block here, which I'm going to make out of acacia because I've got a little bit of that with me, and I want to decorate this thing with acacia. We're going to place that there, and we're going to have a lever here. So effectively, we can turn the machine on and off if we want to. We're going to add a trapdoor there so that we don't end up walking into that hole all that often, but we can still access the chest while it's down there. We can add a little bit of decoration to the outside here as well. Let's do a couple of acacia log pillars like so, and eventually this is going to be a build around the outside of here, just housing everything and hiding the fact that this is a concrete factory, because really with the level of technology we have around here, it doesn't really make sense for the lore of the world that I've created that there's going to be concrete down here, but I don't know. we'll hide that away, and we'll make it less a part of the landscape and more just a necessary utility build. And I wonder if we place some upside down inverted stairs there, if that dropper is still going to spit out the concrete powder as I want it to. But either way, having a powered block here, basically powering the block that we place here, is going to connect the redstone signal that's coming from this lever to this dropper here, which is going to activate the dropper once every time we place a new block here. So each time I place some concrete powder in this water stream, not only is it going to immediately convert to concrete, but you might have noticed it added another concrete powder from this dropper straight into the stack of concrete powder I was holding. So now if we hold down, right click like so, you'll notice that the stack in my offhand doesn't seem to be decreasing in size, or it's pumping out an additional block from that dropper every time I place one here. And as you can see, like I was saying, the blocks here are getting stuck on top of that, but as soon as we break one of them, they're going to flow towards the player with the water, or they're going to flow down into the hoppers, and we've got 27 white concrete already down there in the chest, and we've still got a stack of 64 in my offhand. So effectively standing here like so, and just holding down left click and right click, we've got a more automatic way of feeding through a large supply of concrete. And with this all being covered over to stop the concrete blocks from bouncing around everywhere, not to mention completely covered in hoppers, including a hopper underneath where the player is standing, so that if your inventory is full, all of the concrete ends up in the collection chest. This design is 100% better than this design here, because it doesn't require that constant player interaction. You could just set up a macro on your mouse, or set like alternate key buttons that you can hold down to perform the left and right click actions, and you could go to lunch. The problem with that is that eventually your pickaxe is still going to run out of durability, because even if, like me, you've got Unbreaking 3 on your pickaxe and it's completely full, you don't have any means of recovering XP and mending those tools, and so you're going to end up eventually running down the durability on your pickaxe. And once you've converted probably about like 3,000 to 4,000 concrete, you stand a chance of your diamond pickaxe, even with Unbreaking 3, probably breaking. So ideally, we want a design that can circumvent that problem altogether. We want a design where we can just stand and place concrete powder, have it be converted into concrete, and collected automatically without the need to spend any tool durability whatsoever. And thanks to the fact that TNT is now super powerful in Minecraft 1.14, I think we have a solution. This third and final design is what I'm going to call a kind of no-frills automatic concrete farm. And I say that because there are a number of automatic concrete farms out there which are going to be better than this one. They'll be more efficient, they will probably work on slightly fancier technology. This is something I've cobbled together myself in creative mode. I'm actually quite proud of it, even though it's probably not the slickest looking thing, but it will do the job. And this farm is really for mass production, in the sense that it's not going to give you back all of the concrete powder you put into it. It's meant to be something that you just churn through stacks and stacks of concrete powder, and it gives you a bunch of concrete without you having to wear down the durability on your tools. That's the trade-off. You don't get every single piece of concrete back because it's relying on TNT to blow stuff up, and it's going to be blowing up stuff that is quite close to redstone machinery if we want to get every single block back. But it is going to give you a whole bunch of concrete, and it's going to do that without wearing down your precious pickaxes. So let's get started. We will start by building this quite high up in the air, and so we're going to have to build quite the building to cover this up. We're not going to do that in this episode, but we're going to do it another time, and I'm going to use some of the white concrete that we have converted to sort of build the bones of this machine and allow you to see exactly what's going on here as we go through this step by step. I've also got a bunch of redstone components. We're going to need primarily redstone torches, pistons, and observers, so I've made sure we've got a bunch of those. We will, of course, need hoppers for the collection mechanism as well, and we'll need a bunch of redstone dust, so we've got that in the form of these blocks of redstone that we can break down as we need them. So to start off with, we're going to need to be at least 12 blocks off the ground, but probably a lot more than that, because 12 is the maximum amount of blocks a piston can push before it locks up and you can't push anything else with it. So we're going to be relying on the pistons being able to push blocks downwards and dropping TNT from the top of this farm, allowing gravity to do the work and allowing that to explode a bunch of blocks towards the bottom of the farm, which are then going to land in hoppers. The timing for this is going to be quite precise, and as such, we probably want to start off quite high up so that we don't end up blowing up the hopper collection system at the bottom. So I'm going to start off up here, 20 blocks up. We're at Y90, not that that really matters, but up here we're going to start building our first little section of the farm, and we're going to have a section for water to fall down, but not to fall down particularly far. All we need here is for a water source to convert the concrete powder and to fall harmlessly into a section where it's not going to spill out and touch any of the rest of the redstone components. So that's what we've got here. In order to do this comfortably, we will want 2 blocks worth of space for this water source that's just in the middle of this ring here. Goes down into the middle of that ring there, and it just comes to rest on a single block. So the water doesn't spill out anywhere. We don't have to worry about that interfering with the rest of what we're going to do. Now, in this space, we are going to be building the first of one of 2 feed tape circuits that we're going to be building quite a lot in this farm to propel the blocks around the system and get them where we need to go. We're going to start off by placing a redstone torch here. We need to place a piston up here. And so basically every time we place a block in this space, whenever we place some concrete powder against the head of the piston, we're going to complete a circuit that's going to go around here, and that's what's going to push the block around. So if we have a piston, I've already got a couple in my inventory, let's pop one there, and we need to have a block here and a block there, and those are going to have redstone dust on them. And then each time we place a block here in front of this piston, it's going to complete the circuit. This block is going to be powered, it's going to power this redstone dust, that's going to power the piston, and it gets pushed around the circuit. So that is effectively one of the circuits that we're going to be building over and over again as we put this farm together. In fact, the next place we're going to be building one is right here next door to this one. So we're going to put a block underneath there, we need another redstone torch on top of that, and 2 blocks going up the side, one there and one there. Redstone dust on top of both of those, and each time a block reaches this one, once it's going to be converted into concrete straight away by this flowing water. The concrete is going to be pushed around the circuit, and this one is going to have it pushed in this direction towards the rest of the feed tape, which is also going to start pushing these blocks down. Just to give you a quick example using these grass blocks, because they are blocks that don't look like the rest of the stuff we're building the farm out of, this gets pushed a couple of times and already it's on its way to the next spot. So all we need to do is really stand here and hold that down without the shield equipped so that we don't have anything in our offhand, and as you can see, it's starting to push the grass off in this direction, which is where we're going to build the rest of the mechanism. In fact, we're going to use this grass to measure where we want the next set of stuff in our circuit to go. So what we want is a bunch of pistons facing downwards from this point, powered by an observer. And this observer is going to be detecting when blocks make it this far in the circuit. It's going to send out a single redstone pulse that's going to power 3 pistons next to it, and that's going to force these blocks downwards. So we want one there, and we want to make sure these are all facing downwards, so we're going to place them adjacent to each other like that, and then we're going to connect these to the observer with blocks above them like so, because the problem with pistons is that if you put redstone dust on the back of them, the redstone dust pops off once the piston gets used once. So we want to make sure that they've got some other blocks to rest on so that they can continue to carry the signal. You need to connect that up like so, and then each time anything changes about this block here, whether it gets pushed along from the rest of the feed tape or if a block gets removed right now, for example, it all gets pushed downwards. So as the concrete gets fed along here, this row of 3 pistons is going to be pushing it down into a column that will end up being 13 blocks deep. So that's what 13 blocks looks like, measured down using this white concrete from the head of that piston. And it's going to be 12 blocks that it can push, and it will lock up on the 13th one. But the feed tape is going to continue feeding blocks through, and then it will fill up the other 2 columns as well before it gets to the next corner, and we're going to build another one of those corner circuits to push it round at an angle. We're basically going to set this circuit up 4 times. It's going to loop back around on itself until there are 4 walls of concrete encasing the area which we are then going to blow up with TNT. And of course, ground clearance is kind of a factor here because the TNT has a spherical radius it will blow up around it. So if you're too close to the ground where our collection hoppers are going to be, it's going to blow up the hoppers as well. Hence the need to build this whole mechanism up here in the sky. For the next stage of this circuit, we're going to leave a 1 block gap from the edge of these pistons, and we're going to set up, I've got scaffolding under me by the way, we're going to set up another of the feed tape circuits here, the single piston pushing it around a corner, and from there we're going to add another row of 3 pistons with an observer on top of that. So right here, underneath this block, actually, that's where we'll need to place the redstone torch. So like that, we'll need to put a block there, and then we'll put the redstone torch on top of that, and as the grass is fed round, it's going to complete another one of these piston circuits. Do you get the idea at this point? I think you probably do. So once these 3 pistons have pushed as many blocks as they can, the feed tape is still going to be sending blocks around. It's going to skip 1 block here, it's going to hit this piston and go around a corner, effectively pushing it out into the next row where another row of 3 hoppers is going to be waiting to push it on downwards. Okay folks, quick sidebar, I have just had to move this section of the mechanism back a couple of blocks. You want to make sure there's at least 3 or 4 blocks between this piston here and the first observer on this side, otherwise you're not going to be able to loop the whole thing around on itself. You're going to end up moving some sections of the redstone mechanism over here. So if you're happy with just having 3 walls to this thing, then of course that's totally fine. But if you want 4 walls, then it's probably a good idea to make sure that you've got a bit of clearance for this section so that it doesn't end up wrapping around on itself. But as you can see, all I've done is repeat the same pattern and rotate it each time. So we've got our row of 3 pistons there, there, and there. We're going to build a 4th one over here. And then the fun begins, because then we have to figure out the timing of dropping TNT in this thing so that it explodes the bottom section of our 4 walls of concrete without exploding anything else or us. So when we've taken away all of the scaffolding and all of the extra blocks we needed to place stuff, what we end up with is something that doesn't look particularly fancy, but will hopefully do the job. Now I've got some lime concrete powder here in order to test this. We need to be standing somewhere down here, so I'm just going to create a quick little temporary platform for myself, and all we should need to do now is place lime concrete powder against this piston head here, and each time that gets pushed away, it gets fed around the feed tape. You should start to see it getting pushed down below these pistons here, and hopefully we should be able to fill up at least 1 wall of this with the concrete powder we've got here, and then we should see it continue along around the feed tape. And once again, I'm going to take the shield out of my offhand to do the rest of this, and I should just be able to hold down right click and let the machine do the rest. And there we go. As you can see, what it's done is fill up that first 3 columns of lime concrete powder there. That should be the maximum distance those pistons can push. And then as it started to feed more concrete powder all the way around, it started on this next section as well. So I reckon about 3 stacks will probably fill this entire thing up. And it just so happens that I had 3 stacks of lime concrete powder on me, so let's give that a try. And after mere seconds, with 20 concrete powder left, we have reached the end of the line, where I have put an obsidian block to stop the machine from pushing any further and pushing this stuff out of joint and going over there. But you could always loop it back around into a second mechanism if you wanted to, if you have absolutely loads of concrete powder. Of course, I think it's probably better off if we start destroying some of this concrete to make way for more concrete powder, because once the pistons are able to push some of this concrete again, then they should be able to continue receiving concrete powder at the input end over there. And so this is where the TNT comes in, and to be honest, I have not done a great deal of testing of the timings, so we're going to try and play it a little safe here. And by play it safe, I mean cover the collection area in water. This also serves to cut down on the amount of hoppers we're going to be using for this design. I had originally thought we were just going to make a giant pad of hoppers down here, but if iron is a little bit scarce, you could probably even reduce it down to even 4 hoppers in the center there, and then a feed line running out to your output chest, which is going to be over here. If you wanted to, you could even do a single hopper minecart and some rails underneath a flat platform down here, so that, as usual, the hopper minecart would collect items through the solid blocks. But for now, I think this is worth testing. The main reason I want to cover it with water to begin with is so that if we drop some TNT and we mistime an explosion which is going to try and hit like some of these bottom blocks down here, then it should fall in here and explode harmlessly, because water will block any of the damage it would do to the surrounding blocks. So I'm going to try and play things a little bit safe here. We're going to start off relatively low down, just in case. I want to overshoot this machine rather than accidentally blow a bunch of stuff up. But what we're going to do is set up a fairly simple pulse extender circuit that's going to power this piston for a short amount of time as the TNT gets released from this dispenser. The piston is going to push this block out. It's a sticky piston, by the way. That's very important. The piston is going to hold this block out there in place. It's going to retract it. Once the TNT has had a little bit of time to cook, it's going to fall down here and hopefully explode near the bottom of here. And as I've been looking at this, I realized that I built it slightly different to how I built it in creative. And what we have here is like a 4-block long section instead of a 3-block long section. So I might actually end up rebuilding this anyway. So if it does end up blowing up, not the end of the world. But if not, I'll probably rebuild it off camera. The idea is to at least make this trial run somewhat successful, and then we will do our best to neaten things up in between episodes here. So I haven't loaded up any of the TNT into this dispenser quite yet because we don't want this to go off too early, but what we want to do is create a bit of a platform here about the same size as you would use to build a hopper clock, for example. And we're going to place 2 comparators facing that way, 2 comparators facing that way, and surround that with redstone dust on all sides like that. And now anytime a pulse comes in through here, the comparators are going to slowly wind that pulse down. So the way comparators work is they are comparing signals that come in from the back and from the sides, and so that has the effect of slowly releasing the charge of this redstone. Let's grab a button or something for an example here. And of course I didn't bring any buttons with me, but I've got enough material for a stone button. There we go. So what I should be able to do is power this for a short amount of time now, and then once this has completely run its course, it will start to wind down, and there you go. You heard the piston retract over there. The dispenser didn't fire because this piece of redstone dust there wasn't in place. Let me show you that one more time from the side here. I'll light it up so you can get a better look at it. Press this button, the circuit lights up, and even after the button deactivates, it stays lit for a little while. It keeps that block out for a little bit longer. And so what we want to do here is have an observer measuring the output of, let's say, a note block or something like that. So we get something that we can pulse once, and it will send a single signal through the observer, unlike something else turning on and off might pulse the observer twice, which we don't want 2 blocks of TNT to fall here. We only want 1. So I think what we'll do is come out the back here, and we're going to place a repeater here to extend the signal length, because a single pulse from an observer is not enough to light up this entire circuit. The pulse is actually too short. Like, watch this. See, it didn't get past the first comparator. When I break the block there, same thing. The circuit doesn't light up in its entirety. So we want a little bit more room here. We want to be able to place a repeater there, and we're going to set that to 3 ticks. That's kind of important because that's the length of the delay that we want here. Now let's have an observer. Oh yeah, outputting into that. I always forget which way around you need to place observers. And now if we do anything on this side, like so, circuit lights up for a little while, deactivates, that's going to release the TNT, and hopefully it should blow up somewhere near the base of this. Now I'm going to switch this out for a note block just so that I have something to easily activate the circuit with. And I went and got some sleep because I wasn't sure how long it had been since I last slept, and I didn't want phantoms to come out while I was demonstrating this. So placing a note block over here, that's going to activate the circuit once there's still nothing in there, so we don't have to worry about that. But now, basically, anytime I hit this note block, it's going to send a pulse around the circuit, which should be long enough to activate the piston, cook the TNT, drop it down there, and we'll see how we get on. Now, I have tested this circuit out in my creative test world a couple of times, so hopefully this should work out. I'm just going to put 1 TNT in there for now, in case anything goes wrong, and I'm going to try and hop down onto the mechanism and we can see how this goes. But cross your fingers for me that I've got the timings right here. Okay, the TNT is up there, it spends a little bit of time cooking, that retracts, and it blows the entire thing up. Okay, so that didn't go quite as well as expected, but at least I got to build this in the 5x5 orientation instead of the sort of 6x6 orientation it was before. Anyway, I think I have this pretty much tweaked now. I think the problem before was that I'd built it in a test world, and a couple of these redstone dusts lose power before the ones to like immediately adjacent to them do. So I think I might have had it hooked up to the wrong redstone dust. Either way, it is now a little bit lower down. I'm going to prime this thing with TNT and hope it doesn't blow everything up again. I think, fingers crossed once again for me, folks, but I think we should be onto a winner this time. Here we go. And that should retract, and boom, yes, okay. It took out a large section of the bottom of this little concrete pillar, and all of the redstone around it seems to have been unaffected. Hey, looks like we did it. The spread of this is quite large, though. So I may need to enlarge the size of the pool that we have here, the kind of collection mechanism down the bottom, as it looks like very little of it will have actually ended up in the hoppers. But, okay, we have 46 in there, and that was 64 plus 24. That's 88 concrete with a single TNT blast. That's really not bad. Just to check that that wasn't a fluke, I am going to activate it again, but the timing of the TNT as it's primed by the dispenser should be consistent. I'm pretty sure people rely on stuff like this for other contraptions, so hopefully this TNT, when it drops, should explode at roughly the same place, and it does, and it looks like that took out a couple more of the straggling sections of concrete around there. Remember that TNT explosions are a little bit random, so there's not a huge amount you can do in terms of like exactly defining where you want it to explode. I think you can align stuff. There are like tricks you can do to align the TNT a little bit better, but realistically, that's not a bad output. And here's how we help this thing become a little bit more automatic. First of all, we need to put a dropper above the player's head here. It could go under the feet as well, or potentially on this side, but that's also going to interfere slightly. Of course, the Wandering Trader has shown up. It could interfere potentially with this redstone torch here. Maybe behind us might be a good idea, but one thing you can do is pop down a dropper there, and that requires you to add very little redstone, because all you'll need to do is place some redstone dust on top of this slab, which I can't reach right now. Let me pillar up for a second. Yeah, some redstone dust on top of there, and we can just tuck ourselves away in here, fill this up with as much concrete powder as we want to, and of course you could have a hopper feeding into that from a chest from above, and now every time this circuit activates, it's also going to activate this dropper, so that's going to provide you with another concrete powder every time. And there we go, that is all of our lime concrete powder converted into concrete, and the concrete has made its way around the system and is ready to be shuttled into position on these pistons. And of course the step after that is to set the TNT death trap here onto some sort of timer, where that's a hopper clock that you just switch on with a simple lever pull, and then that activates the note block, causing the circuit to pulse every so often. Maybe you can time it more precisely so that you end up with all of these concrete walls getting filled up and then a TNT drops. Like if you can time how long it takes you to fill up the system, you can work with hopper clock timings to get things down more exactly. Alternatively, you could take a pulse out of one of the observers or something around here and allow it to trigger the falling. Obviously that would mean that the farm was not completely full, and you don't want to let it get completely to the end, because the TNT will take at least 4 seconds to explode some stuff, by which time you've probably jammed up the mechanism with a bit more concrete. So there are a few different options there, some of which I think I'll probably explore off camera, because I am hitting the 11th hour when it comes to needing to get this episode edited and out to you guys. But you can see the potential here, can't you? You can see how this is going to allow us to make a whole bunch of concrete out of concrete powder with an automated process. That means we don't have to wear down the pickaxe and keep mending it. The player barely has to be involved as long as you've got something doing the right clicking for you. Hopefully everything should go according to plan. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide. Thank you so much for watching. My name has been Pixlriffs. Don't forget to leave a like on this episode if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you guys soon. Take care. Bye for now.